Well, hi, I'm John Carlson, and on behalf of the Murphy family, or the Murphy clan as I like to call them, I want to welcome you all here to celebrate an amazing man. And that everyone here has an amazing story about Michael and your interactions with him. We were trying to decide, is this a celebration of a person's life, or is this a memorial service? So we decided we were going to go with celebration. And so in case that you want to clap or stand up and say hallelujah, anything goes here. So feel comfortable to do that.
Hallelujah!
Thank you. Also yesterday, Sandra Murphy gave me this little box of Band-Aids. They're screen bandages, and they have little screens on them. So if anyone needs one today, come to me and I will administer that for you. But this is a time to just be together with Michael and family and friends and celebrate an amazing life. Music was a very important part of Michael's life, as we all know. And the last couple of years, when we were in Zoshenbera, which is overlooking the Atlantic Ocean in Ireland, he would do workshops. And he got to the point where he wanted to do meditations, which was a big step for Mike, to get away from talking and actually being silent and letting it happen. So we'd all get together, and he got this great idea because of this piece of music that he wanted everybody in the mornings to get together and meditate, looking out at these big picture windows at the ocean. So, and also the piece was called Spiegel in Spiegel, which means mirror in mirror. And for those of us, you'll notice everybody, you have a mirror and a candle.
Yes.
The mirrors will come in handy later. The candles also, don't light them yet. And we'll tell you when to blow them out. Let's see, anything else that I missed? So, Spiegel in Spiegel is a really important piece of music for Michael. And it's a beautiful piece of music. And a few years ago, Lila Brown came to one of Michael's workshops, and she brought her viola with her. And she happens to be here today with her viola and accompanist Alfred Yedak. And they are going to play for us Spiegel in Spiegel. invite up to the podium now Sister Jean Murphy for a blessing.
Mindful of the pleasant presence of God within and beyond us, as well as the presence of Michael's indomitable spirit among us. Let us give thanks and bless him for the gifts he has bestowed upon this planet and upon one another, for the inspiration inherent in the tenacity, exuberance, and delight with which he pursued his ideals, vision, and mission, undeterred by even the imminence of death, seemingly indefatigable, for his courage and daring to traverse the inner landscape of soul, and teaching us all to follow, mindful that the outer work will never be puny if the inner work is great. For the legacy of the loving gaze, suspending judgment and viewing with eyes wide with wonder the beauty in creation and in one another. For teaching us to recognize the gifts which sometimes come in guise of darkness. As we entrust Michael to the divine grace, the place where longing and belonging meet, let us pray also in loving memory of Mike's beloved daughter, Paula, and for that infinitely lovable Murphy family, in gratitude for their myriad manifestations of strength, wisdom, loyalty, and love. Let us bless and give thanks also for Mike's faithful friends, colleagues, and for those ever-expanding concentric circles known as the Love, Loss, and Forgiveness community, who continue to accompany Michael in his hour of greatest need. Finally, for each one of us here present today, and for those at a distance, may we be faithful to the gifts entrusted to our care, and may our light, albeit flickering at times, continue to shine forth in unaccountable faith, in stubborn hope, and in love that illumines every broken thing it finds. Amen.
Thank you, Sister. Now I'd like to bring up to the podium Suzanne Murphy and John Murphy for their dad.
I'm Sue. This is John. We're number 2 and 4 in 5 children, or out of 5 children. Our dad was a complex person with nooks and crannies, lots of quirky traits, a British accent, a Roger Moore type of appeal. Or so he told us. The Queen's mum thought that. And he had a very generous heart. He was an embellisher and saw things in a big way. He would say things like, "It was the best ever experience," or "the most beautiful person I've ever met," or "the nicest ever." And it was, in that moment, until the next best moment came along. He had the Irish gift of gab, and often a story that could be told in a mere paragraph was instead told in essay format. He was many things and provided us kids with countless stories and adventures.
So we have a few anecdotes for you. My dad influenced my love of golf. Most golfers have felt the joy of hitting the occasional good shot on a sunny day with beautiful green grass underfoot. We played rounds of golf at fairways in England and Canada, but most of our golfing was right here in this local area in New Scotland, New York, at a now defunct club called Tall Timbers. Aside from the traditional tips on golfing that I got from Dad regarding grip, swing, club selection, and ball placement, he also taught me that speed is an important and essential part of the golf game. We would zip from hole to hole. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to use my finger because I write this down. We'd zip from hole to hole with our twosome, and we'd frequently butt up against slower golfers, often in the form of the dreaded foursome. Not to be stymied, Dad taught me that it was okay to skip over a hole. And it was even better if we skipped several holes, zigzagging through the course in a pinball pattern while maintaining forward velocity at all costs. Don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed these moments with Dad, and I wouldn't trade those for the world. And they did teach me something. They taught me that some obstacles can be avoided simply by changing course.
My dad was a modern-day Paul Bunyan, a fully mature 200-year-old, 3-foot trunk diameter Dutch elm tree needed to be felled in our front yard when we lived on Bullock Road. Dad, with his trusted but rarely used chainsaw, rose to the task. No safety goggles or chaps were to be had. Now the tree had options in the direction it fell once cut: onto the house, across the road taking out the phone and electrical wires, across the driveway, or, if all went well, along the front lawn. To ensure the proper trajectory, Dad put a rope around a large upper branch and had the 5 of us kids, ages 12, 11, 10, 8, and 7, pulled in the direction he wanted the tree to go. Needless to say, as Dad and the saw began to cut, we saw the truth and scattered. And the tree fell in the direction of its own accord, across the road.
As we all know, my dad was a big thinker. We had a yellow fiberglass canoe that was larger than the aluminum variety common in the 1970s. It was so special, our fellow Boy Scouts dubbed it the Cadillac. As in, look, the Cadillac is stuck on a rock roller. One spring, Dad decided to venture out onto a creek nearby called Norman's Kill with my Uncle Jerry, who was visiting us from England, and myself. And Uncle Jerry was a priest, and I don't know how much experience he had in the canoe. So because of rain and melting snow, the creek was flowing very swiftly, and we approached a section of challenging rapids. So we dutifully grounded the canoe, we got out, we scouted the rapids, and with some trepidation came up with a plan to traverse the torrent unscathed. After many deep breaths, we climbed back into the canoe, pushed off from shore, steered into the current, and headed straight for a towering wave, which I don't think was by design. Needless to say, the bow of the canoe dipped under the wave. The canoe immediately filled with water and sank. And we were left to fend for ourselves in the turbulent, freezing water. This lesson taught me 2 things. It taught me that enthusiasm is not always the best substitute for an experience-based strategy. And you should always have a life jacket, which we didn't.
My dad was a flexible and versatile driver. He was able to use the right or left side of the road, depending on the country he was in. And it generally came easy to him, except for the time that he was cursing at the man coming head-on towards him, realizing in the nick of time that he himself was on the wrong side of the road. He honed his skills at amazing speeds on the narrow Irish roadways, and on our visit to him in Castletownbere, we experienced firsthand his ability to be within inches of the stone walls that hugged some of the roads. This flexibility, however, did not extend to turning his head around at all when he was driving. As a result, he backed through 2 of our garage doors and destroyed at least 2 mailboxes. He was never able to move beyond the learner's license in Ireland because he refused to turn his head during the exam. Although he didn't have one of these in his own car, he marveled at my rear camera and felt they were designed just for him.
My dad was wretched Let me explain that. Grant was one of my best friends in school. We had many adventures together, and as we got older, fewer of those adventures were known to my parents. I always thought that Grant's parents were pretty cool, but it's difficult to be objective with your own parents, so I really wasn't sure that it was a good idea to allow my friends and parents to interact. Despite those worst intentions, my friends and parent worlds would periodically collide, and Dad had a habit of employing his British humor to tweak my friends with feigned disgust on our choice of music, clothing, or even just our general presence. Surprisingly, Grant caught on to this humor, and Dad henceforth became known and was routinely addressed by Grant as the wretched father. I had forgotten this, but a couple of years ago, I reconnected with Grant, and he proceeded to inquire about the wretched father. Again, lessons learned. This taught me that humor can often bridge gaps, and our own limited perspective is not always the correct perspective.
My dad was my constant teacher. I worked with him briefly at Hospice when I was an intern and listened in on several profound family meetings during that time. During the last few weeks of his life, we had daily trips to the radiation therapy department at Ellis Hospital for palliative pain control treatments. Dad was interested in the people there, and one of the nurses mentioned that it was her birthday. When Dad asked about her birthday celebrations, she stated that she had never had a birthday party in her life. The following day, Dad brought ice cream bars for all the RT staff. He had each person remember their favorite birthday, put a candle in the ice cream bar and lit it, and we all sang happy birthday to each person there. These were his teaching moments and are the moments that I hold close as I hear myself use some of his words and techniques in my own work.
My dad helped light a fire. He encouraged my sense of adventure through our shared experiences. As children, there were visits to foreign places, whether connecting with family in England, Ireland, and Canada, or driving nearly impassable roads in the Canary Islands. There was always something new to discover. I can remember tamping down divots at halftime on a polo field near London and trying to pronounce an impossibly named town from a sign hung on a store in Wales. Then there were the outdoor moments, canoeing, which we talked about, and hiking the Adirondacks, cross-country skiing for miles in the local hills, skating on our pond in the backyard, downhill skiing, anywhere we could, regardless of the weather. These were all activities that were loved by Dad, and they were all passions for me that were inspired through these shared life experiences.
So our dad was a complex person, but we hope these lighthearted anecdotes have provided a glimpse of our dad through his children's eyes and memories. And of course, as we leave the podium, I'll borrow some sage words Dad would proclaim as he would leave, and perhaps some of you knew these words. Me spectacles, my testicles, my watch, my wallet.
Michael's granddaughter, Jennifer, will now do a musical selection for us.
So my grandpa was very loving, and I'm honored to represent all the grandchildren. I think we can all agree he was very supportive and interested in everything we did. So he always encouraged me with music, and I'm really happy to play this song. 1,000 dreams you gave to me. You held me high, you held me high, and all those years you guided me, so I could find my way. How long your love had sheltered me. You held me high, you held
have another son, Steve.
My child arrived just the other day. He came to the world in the usual way, but there were planes to catch and bills to pay. He learned to walk while I was away, and he was talking for I knew it. And as he grew, he'd say, I'm gonna be like you, Dad. You know I'm gonna be like you. And the cat's in the cradle.
Thank you, John. Sorry to be in front of you. So my father often spoke about the challenge of the relationship with his own father. He would then often extend that to me and muse whether he was a good father to me and to John and to the other siblings in the family, something that all fathers who have children wonder. For those who didn't recognize that opening riff, it's a song written by one of my favorite singers, or perhaps storytellers, Harry Chapin. It's entitled Cats in the Cradle. It's a song in which a father tells the story of his newborn sons and his relationship as the son grows up and has children of his own, emphasizing their struggle to find quality time together throughout the years. The reoccurring theme is, I'm going to grow up just like you, Dad. You know I'm going to be just like you. Is that really so bad? My father had many moments of brilliance, but to be honest, there were times I really had to scratch my head just like John. And there are other times I look back and think how lucky we were as children to survive. I'd like to take you on a short walk down my memory lane and do a bit of storytelling myself, to show you how this cradle developed for me and to reflect on Dad's influence on my personal life. My earliest memories of Dad were fairly tactical. It was often how a soft slipper can be an effective learning tool, or how outbursts of, "Oi!" or "use your bloody blinker" would influence me. And honestly, I'm not sure how Americans understood what a bloody blinker was. I also learned from Dad that there were many animal parts for which most families didn't consume, but we did. Or should I say he did? Liver, tongue, kidney. We Murphy children all became experts at hiding food in our napkins. Looking back, I see Dad's reverse psychology on me, taking me to Stonyhurst boarding school in England, where he went as a boy and as a schooling option for me should my grades not improve. This is 5th grade. I did get a glimpse of Dad's radical youth as he told me stories of upperclassmen eating first and then standing in the balcony and throwing bars of soap into the soup pot, leaving the younger classes to eat tainted meals. What a rebel. Did you know that my father was in the Army, or my grandfather was in the Army, and that my father joined the Royal Air Force? I never asked him what motivated him to go into the military, but it's amazing that I took a similar route going into the U.S. Army, and my daughter Anne in the U.S. Air Force. Perhaps I'm going to grow up a little bit like my dad. On the questionable judgment side were an assortment of other experiences. Every summer we pile into the car and we drive from Boston to Cape Cod on a vacation. This included stuffing the sunfish sailboat into the station wagon. We'd have a kid squashed on either side of the boat and one in the cockpit. No seat, no seat belts, and a boat that could drop out the back. Like John, I remember participating in a canoeing expedition with Dad. He took me whitewater canoeing and proceeded to stand up in the back of the canoe to peruse the water up ahead to find a navigable path. Yes, he lost his balance, and over we went into the cold, cold upper Hudson River in May. It was a very painful experience. I learned from Dad that winning is not always a good idea. Dad would hold contests for us kids with surprise prizes. Lucky for me, John and Sandra were the one to win the trophies in the form of chickens and goats. I can still see John chasing the chickens throughout the yard and Sue and Sandra going out early in the morning to milk the goats before school. A bit later in life, I entrusted my dad with my 15-year-old daughter, Sarah, who went to visit him in San Francisco. Dad would send Sarah out solo into the streets of San Francisco as a 15-year-old grocery shopping. He also asked her what she most wanted to do in San Francisco, and she said, "Grandpa, I want to go see Alcatraz Island." So he took her to see a very strange movie instead. To this date, it's just burned into her mind. There were also mixed lessons in patience and amazement. We used to go out to pizza here on Central Avenue, but amazingly, I didn't like pizza as a little boy. And Dad would take me down the street to pick up a hot dog and bring it back to the pizza place. On the other hand, I have a golfing story just like John, but it's a little bit different. Dad would try to coach me after a particularly bad shot and give me his expert wisdom on how to improve. Then after he hit, he'd proceed to throw his club 30 to 50 feet down the fairway. My family visited Dad in Ireland, and he insisted on cooking us a fish dinner. Now, being a fishing village, Castletownbere, fish is always fresh and easy to find, unless you insist on cooking herring, which they use as bait. We had quite an argument with the local fish sellers. Dad tried to convince her that herring was delicious to slurp down. And I have to ask people, I have in the footnote here, have any of you ever had to clean up the kitchen after cooking with Michael? Amazing experience. One of the crowning achievements during our trip to Ireland was climbing Skellig Michael. Dad was amazing and huffed and puffed to the top of the mountain. In fact, it's one of the pictures in the brochure that you have today. And at the top, we sat down to eat our deluxe sandwiches, custom made by each person to their own taste. Dad proceeded to sit down and eat my son-in-law Miles' sandwich, and this left Dad's sandwich for Miles, which had so much oil in it, you could truly wring it out of the bread. Poor Miles was already green from the boat ride. If any of you have taken the boat ride out to Skellig Michael, you know it's not an easy trip. And he remembers this vividly to this day. Dad excelled in extroverted relationships, which is something that was not genetically passed on to me. And this was visible when my family visited Dad in Ireland, and he insisted on taking us for a pub, which actually, as the crow flies, was not too far away from the house, but a really, really long drive on the winding roads. When we entered the pub, the barman greeted us, "Michael, what do you have?" The next day, going a different direction, equally similar distance, we were similarly greeted, "Michael, what do you have?" So we started to really worry about Dad's drinking habits in Ireland. In fact, every pub seemed to know him by name. And in honor of this, if you listen to the music in the reception afterwards, you're going to hear two songs. One is all about an Irish pub being in every town in the world, and the second is To Raise a Parting Glass. All that poking aside, Dad often went the extra mile. Despite me being a bit wild in high school, switching majors in college, joining the Army, he always seemed to roll with the punches. I have fond memories of long cross-country skiing family outings, including a trip to the Trapp Family Lodge. He also took me on up to Lake George to participate in the 30-mile Rogers Rangers run, where I nearly died. I remember many bike rides with Dad, including riding all the way up from our house to Thatcher Park up that huge hill, where I nearly died. This was then capped by him sending me on a 2-week formative youth hosteling outing all by myself, where we rode over 1,000 miles on our bikes. Are you sensing a theme? Dad often accompanied John and me on our Boy Scout outings. Interestingly, I became an assistant scoutmaster myself and went on many, many joyful outings with my son, Patrick. Much of Dad's life was about helping the living deal with loss, and while visiting Philadelphia, he came that long distance to hear Kathy, my wife, and I perform Danforth's Requiem for the Living. He cried at its intense beauty. Listen for the Kyrie, which is a movement about facing grief head-on, and Lux Aeterna, which is about eternal life, in the reception's music. They were two of Dad's favorites. So, what is a good father? It's someone who does his best and exposes his son to experiences that provide the foundation to build life on. The Cats in the Cradle story concludes with the father's observation that the son had grown up just like him, Devon.
And now, now. The dynamic trio. You're going to come up individually or together? Sister Emer and Kelly. And Disson and Kelly.
Yes.
I always call them the dynamic trio.
Not surprisingly, the hospice created by Mike was a designer creation, unlike any other. An embodiment of his amazing gifts of creativity, vivid imagination, and a breadth of wisdom and vision unlike that of most mortals on the planet. As pioneers, we were free of external constraints and had infinite latitude. The sky was the limit, so onward and upward we soared. Ever the creator, Mike wove us into a living tapestry of myriad colors, motivated and united by the mission of bringing our hearts to suffering. He made of us together far more than we were apart, a community of healers. He also modeled for us an attitude of openness, wherein neither a person, an emotion, a lifestyle, a belief system, nor an innovative idea was ever viewed as alien. Complementarity of giftedness was integral to our program. Some among us were able to integrate both personal and professional gifts, like the nurse, who was also skilled in therapeutic touch, our singing social worker, a volunteer hairdresser who was also a gourmet cook, the artist who created our unique daycare program, and the funeral director who became an adept bereavement coordinator. Ministering to the psycho-spiritual needs of patients and families was also a collaborative endeavor. Mike challenged us to use our gifts to the max, and in that process, we discovered abilities we didn't even know we had. Not one of us was perfect, but together we came closer to the ideal. Mike's passion for equity of care extended also to the staff. Thus, we were participants in talking stick rituals, retreats, renewal experiences, soul search weekends, process meetings, and bereavement rituals. Mandated monthly education featured topics ranging from acupuncture and dream work to psychodrama. Our presenters included Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and Tom Moore, author of the book Care of the Soul. Merely witnessing Michael's charismatic gifts helped us to grow as evocateurs, listeners, and guides. We came to know our patients and families intimately, and were deeply involved in their care. I recall a 10-year-old home care patient with a brain tumor. On his first visit to daycare, he was greeted with a huge hug by Mike. Subsequently, and with some assistance, the child created a papier-mâché silver airplane, 4 feet long. It remained suspended above his bed. And as death neared, he turned to his mother and said, "Mom, don't worry about me. That plane is going to carry me to heaven." As that story suggests, our patients and their families were a source of courage, inspiration, wisdom, and grace, grounding us in gratitude for the gift of the present moment and reminding us that it's never too late to reconcile relationships and celebrate life. In ministering to them, our own wounds were often healed and our lives irrevocably transformed. To conclude, it may be that the greatest significance of the Albany Hospice was the fact that it became the ground in which seeds were sown, nurtured, and grew. In time, blossoming into a global garden known as the Love, Loss, and Forgiveness Project. When all is said and done, it's all about love.
Unlike Jean, I have not written my talk, but I have things to say. Michael was not a perfect person, but I would like to say who among us is a perfect person. I saw him as an innovator, a bit of a Renaissance man who knew something about all fields of learning. He founded St. Peter's Hospice only 12 years after St. Christopher's was founded in England. So hospice in this area was an innovation. He taught us to be and not to do. That's one of the greatest things I think he gave us. We had an all-RN staff, which was most unusual. We were taught to accompany the dying in a way that was beautiful. Mike was constantly teaching. He could not pass you in the hallway without saying something that was taught by him. We were empowered as nurses. He believed in us. He defended us with other physicians who wanted to write orders or didn't want to write orders. And we were empowered. The great emphasis of St. Peter's Hospice was its psycho-spiritual aspect. And he bonded us so beautifully together that we continue with that bond right now, forever. I have a quote about leadership that I found just this morning, and to me it embodies what Mike taught us. The very essence of leadership is that you have to have a vision. Mike had a vision. It's got to be a vision you articulate clearly and forcefully on every occasion. The end of the quote. Mike could be intimidating, but he was always the teacher. I have two examples of his presence among us. One was on the occasion of a staff meeting that we were supposed to have, a party that we had been looking forward to for a long time. Mike called right before the party and said, "I have an admission, I'm bringing him in." Needless to say, we were not happy at that time. We had to do the paperwork, take care of the patient, get orders from the physician. It was a lot of work to do an admission. And we were not friends of Mike that day. That night, however, I had this vision of Mike very gently carrying this man into the hospice inn. And that to me was the essence of who he was as well. I loved Mike. Another example is I was taking care of a dying patient, and she was having a very difficult time breathing, was breathing very rapidly, and I felt that she needed a little bit of medication to ease her body's work. Her physician made rounds. I asked for the medication, and he said, "No, she doesn't need it." So I went to the nurse's station, picked up the phone, called Mike, and I swear, he was in the next building in his office, and I think he took those stairs 2 at a time to get to the inn to help. He spoke to the physician, we got the medication, end of story. But that in my mind was what hospice was with Mike. And he also said that love is everything.
The only thing I can say is wow, Sister Jean and Anne. I too was a nurse at the hospice in the early years, and I have written some things down, and I'm going to use Mike's name as Dr. Murphy, and that's how I met him, as Dr. Murphy. And he created a welcoming, home-like atmosphere at the inn when the creation took place. It was always open. We had a guest room. There was a large open space called the day room, which had a kitchen, so families could make meals. We also had a play area for the children. And the whole atmosphere spoke of come and stay to our families. The space and the functioning of the team with Mike as his medical director allowed a physician at one point when I was nursing there to come to me after his beloved patient had died, and he said, I want to say that what you and the team did at hospice gave my patient back his life, and I want to thank you for that. And it was a place where we did help people live to the end of their life. And it started with the family meeting. Each patient coming to the inn would have a family meeting with Dr. Murphy, and the primary nurse would attend, but she would just be there as a witness, not to speak or. Sometimes the gathering would be a large family, or sometimes it would be just a person with a friend, or maybe no one. But after Dr. Murphy would introduce himself, it always started with the same thing. He would go very gentle and caring to the patient, sit next to them, and just say, tell me what's been happening. And it was amazing to see people speak about what was happening to them. And when this story was told, I would witness words and gestures of love, uncertainty, pain, regrets, anger, and worry. It was a very sacred time, this family telling their story. I would come to know my patient and family in a very special way. And from this family meeting, we would make a plan of care for the patient and the family. They were one. We weren't just treating the patient, but incorporating the family. And pain was a big part. I think when people think of hospice or cancer, immediately pain enters into their mind. But one thing Mike taught us was the many components of pain, that it's just not a physical thing. There's pain of the heart and the soul. And this was constantly discussed, and we constantly learned through meetings, conferences, from the oncologist. Even we would have a pharmacist come and explain the way certain narcotics would act in the brain, which would be better for the patient. And this is what Mike created, excellence of care of the patient and family during the dying process. So I just say, Michael, rest in peace.
Michael was someone that was always curious. He was curious about everything. And one day he found out about this weird community, intentional community in Cambridge, New York. And he decided to visit there, and he bumped into me, who was one of the founders of that community. And I was the person then to take him on a tour. I had no idea who this guy was. He showed up out of nowhere, and we started talking. And he started telling me about the work that he did with the dying. And being a Scorpio, death is something that's always been close to me and I always thought about. And so here was someone that really was like an expert in death. So he was really compelling to me. And I was also a documentary filmmaker, and that was compelling to Michael. And he invited me to come to a workshop of his called Death and Dying. Back then it was Death and Dying, and it went through a number of iterations from there. And I went to this workshop more as an observer than a participant. And I got to watch the magic of Michael Murphy. taking place where I'm just there to look and see what's going on, and all of a sudden I was taken into this process, and I was talking to my dad, who was still alive at the time, about dying. And he was on his deathbed, and I spoke to him. And I left that experience feeling like, wow, something has changed in me. Something deep has changed in me. And I have to say that when my dad did end up dying, my mom, who's here, and I were in a hospital in New York City, and without having had that experience that Michael gave me, and all the experiences after that with Michael, I would not have been present for my dad's passing in the way that I ended up being. I could actually be there, and I could feel it, I could allow it to happen, I could hold on to the terrible beauty of my dad dying. And Michael taught me that, and many other things. So Michael and I got together. He said, so what did you think after this workshop? And I said, well, I was very moved, Michael. And he said, well, what do you think? And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, do you think we can like make a film or something? And I said, well, yeah, I'm sure we can make a film, but I think that we could probably do more than that. And so that ended up becoming 10, 15 years of experiences with Michael Murphy, helping to create the Love, Loss, and Forgiveness project. And helping somebody with their life's work and legacy is a really hard job, and helping Michael Murphy with his legacy was even a harder job. And it took both patience on both of our behalves, but it was so amazing to be in his presence and be able to just go into his mind and try to get clear about what it is that he was actually trying to get to. And there were a lot of participants of the Love, Loss, and Forgiveness project who would get tired. They'd say, I'm tired of the death already, please, no more dying, you know? And Michael would say, well, this is not about death. This is about living. This whole process is about learning how we can live better. It isn't about like, waiting for death or looking for death or any of those things. It's like, well, what do we love? What do we find passionate in? And to hold on to those things and to bring them inside us. And Michael was just there. I watched Michael talk about death, talk about living, talking about living the loving life, and then I had the unbelievable opportunity of watching Michael die. So I got to actually say, well, here's this man who really spoke these words, and he seemed like he knew what he was talking about, and wow, what wisdom. But no, now he's on the other side of the counter. He's the person that they're saying, you have cancer. He's the person they're saying, you're going to die. And to watch Michael go through that transition from being alive, and it didn't take very long, to being dead, was one of the most incredible experiences of my life. It taught me more than ever that I want to live as robustly as possible. I want to really embrace this. I want to love my family. I want to love my friends. I want to help save the earth. I want to do whatever it takes to be in contact with this living energy that we all are endowed with. And that's what Michael taught me. And he is an amazing man. I miss it. I miss him so much. I miss his creativity. That's one of the things that really made it hard working with him, is that every time you go to try to get something nailed down, it changed. It was like all of a sudden it was like, well, I think it's not the Love, Loss, and Forgiveness project anymore, it's living the loving life. How's that? and that was Michael. And God bless him. And he will continue to inspire, I believe, all of us to live more loving lives and to be glorious in our own lives. So that's what I have to say about Michael. I did want to say one last thing, which was that I spent a lot of time in Ireland with Michael. And one of the things that Michael liked to do is take groups to the cemetery where there was a mass grave for children who died during the famine. And it was an extraordinary place. You would walk into the cemetery and the hair on the back of my neck would stand up. And it was the first time I was in this cemetery that I was graced with these sounds.
From glen to glen and down the mountainside, the summer's gone and all the flowers are died. It's you must go, and I must bide. But come ye back when summer's in the meadow, or when the valley's hushed and white with snow. It's I'll be there in sunlight or in shadow. Danny boy, oh Danny boy, I love you so. But when we come and all the flowers are dying, if I am desperate, I will you come and find the spot where I am lying, and you and say I'm not there for me, and I will hear, oh, soft you tread upon, and all my grave will warm sweeter, for you will bend and tell me that you loved me, and I will rest in peace until you come to me. Oh, it was not that nature had spread o'er the sea her purest of crystal, brightest of green. Oh no, it was something more exquisite still. Oh, it was something more exquisite still. 'Twas that friend, the beloved of my bosom, were near, who made every dear scene of enchantment more dear, and who knew that thou hast seen of nature improve, when we see them reflected, those that we love, when we see them reflected in looks that we love. Oh, Michael, dear Michael, our prayer comes to you. May you rest in the shade with all the friends who and our hearts like thy waters are mingled in peace.
That was Don Paul Shen, a really good friend of Michael's, and he was also worked at the hospice for many years and taught workshops with Michael as well in LLM. So now comes a time where you're wondering why you're so uncomfortable in your seats. If you're sitting on it, it's a little round disc. And if you would find those round discs at this time, you'll notice that they're mirrors. And mirrors were one of those things that Michael liked to pull out in workshops. And there are a lot of people here who have been to Michael's workshops and know when the mirror got pulled out, usually people had a little consternation to deal with. But I hope that you're not going to experience that today. Instead, what we're going to do is a little exercise that Michael used to like to do, which is to not look into the mirror, but to gaze into the mirror. Now there's a difference. If everyone would just now gaze or look into the mirror, put your little mirror up and look into it, and no messing with your hair. See, that's what I'm saying. Like people, they look into mirrors and they mess with their hair, they check their makeup, they say, oh my God, I have wrinkles and all these things. But that's not what he was going after. He was going after the gaze, which is more like when a mother gazes at a child or a baby, and the baby gazes back, and there's no language, but there's love. And he got to the point where he said, well, we really need to do this for ourselves. It's really hard to look in the mirror. Only a few people, the practiced ones, are looking into the mirror still. Let's all look into the mirror and let's love the person in the mirror while we listen to this song. John? I didn't have a mirror, and Michael rarely had the mirror, just for the record. He really hated this exercise for himself. But I have to say that not having a mirror allowed me to look out at all of your faces, and you are so beautiful to me. It's really beautiful to see all your faces mostly gazing at yourself. I'd like to bring up to the podium Ann Mawson, who has been involved with the Love, Loss, and Forgiveness project for many years. And I have to say that there are many people here who could be up here as well. We had to pick one person, and mostly because her lovely voice was elected.
Thank you, John. Yes, I feel I am speaking on behalf of many, and thank you, I feel I'm speaking on behalf of many of us here, so I won't go through the list because I might forget someone, but you are there in the list. What I keep thinking back to is Michael sitting at our round kitchen table with my dad and whoever else was there. Can you hear me? Oh, well, thank you. How about that? Thank you. Is that better?
Yes.
Good. Well, what I keep thinking back to is when Michael would come and visit me and my father and my family, because my dad was not in hospice exactly, but he was in a rehab place, and they said, you know, your dad's going to die very soon. So my husband Jonathan said, well, why don't we bring Frank home? Because the rehab was not an inn, it was definitely not. So my dad came for 2 weeks, but he actually ended up staying with us for 3 years. And it was wonderful. And there were those times when Michael would come to our house and we'd sit in the kitchen at the table, and anyone who was there, and it was just so beautiful. These were the sweetest times, dear man. I also circle back to food, and when I think that's really too prosaic, I realize that glasses of wine and bowls of curry with friends are true communion, where soul and spirit meet. Meet they did because love was there. What gifts those times we all shared with Michael Ware. So looking back, how could it be almost a quarter of a century ago when a family with young children recently transplanted from Southeast Asia and feeling deeply homesick met Michael through the founder of the Albany Free School, Mary Lawyer, and her doctor at family practice, Mary Jo Fink. It's a very small world, and the journey to love, loss, and forgiveness, and to living a loving life for many of us began at an LLF workshop. So LLF stands for both love, loss, and forgiveness, and for living a loving life. Michael gave us all a curriculum in the simple yet profound guidebook where he taught us to practice forgiving anyone who had hurt us, including ourselves, so the pain could soften and allow us to live and love. Although he was a storyteller himself, one of his many gifts was gently and persistently encouraging us to tell our stories and secrets to lighten the burden. Michael dedicated the guidebook of simple and beautiful practices, and we just did one of them, to all mortal souls and spirits around the world who are courageous enough to take the steps necessary to live more loving lives. And he was the bravest of all, leaving safe and comfortable footprints we can step into. So Michael won't be ringing on the doorbell anymore, but I think we have all learned from him that to gaze and listen to one another is love, and we can be human beings, not human doings. Rushing around so busy we don't have time to sit down, to listen, to be a witness and be witnessed. So whether in a trio or a group of 9, over mussels, Thai fruit, aquavit and pickled herring, or a simple cup of tea, with or without the talking stick or spoon, may we all have time to spend time with each other. But Michael knew also that it's not so easy, so his last beautiful gift was showing us yet again how to do it, modeling for us how to make sure we have the support and love from friends when we need it, before angels' wings take us. Full of heady and big ideas, ever enthusiastic, but also completely practical, Michael taught so many of us by his example, calling us, inviting us in, so we could see how to gracefully, beautifully, and lovingly navigate the passage from this world to the next, when he was gathered in by Paula, who was waiting at the open window. So actually, if anyone would like to do the practices we do, we're going to be, some of us who are, I think we might call ourselves the custodians of LLF, we'll be meeting at Still Point in September, so just ask me or anyone afterwards and we will tell you. So it is with profound thanks to you, dear friend, that is Michael, and to your dear family for illuminating our lives and for folding us all into this loving embrace here.
The river, the life, is right down at the bottom, just the thinnest of strands, the Colorado. Almost in this expanse, it's almost just like a venule in the hand or the leg or anywhere, and that's where the life is flowing. And you have to sort of, as it were, dig really down deep to get to it. It's amazing. It is a bit like us. I think we've layered experiences and burdens and tragedy, and we've layered all these things on ourselves, and the life flow, the river of love, loss and forgiveness, as I have just thought about it as, has just got buried so deep, and it needs to be exposed. And in the exposure, I mean, just look at this exposure. All those things are just unbelievably beautiful. All the stories, painful and otherwise, that we've experienced are they're beautiful. You don't want to get rid of them, and you don't want to just mine down to the source. You just let them be. And so often I think we're afraid to do that. We're afraid, oh, it's just too much, too many layers, too much weight. But there it is. So that's the Grand Canyon for me. Just a sort of a magnificent, natural example of what each of us goes through. And the important thing we need to reach is the life force, the water, that flows from here on to the sea to join all the water there is. You might think of that as death, I suppose, and life as the river. And there it is, amazing. It's absolutely amazing. And of course it's so breathtaking and beautiful to see, and I think life is, when you look at it, when you look through all the layers, all the experiences, all the screams, all the joy, all the pain, all the stupidity, all the rock falls. But it's not easy to get down there. It's just one path, and it goes up the other side. Amazing.
Sandra, you can come in.
Dad loved music. If his life were an aria, it sang out in 3 interwoven melodies: in his family, in hospice, and the Love, Loss, and Forgiveness Project. In many ways, the 3 were distinct, and each had its own cast of characters and its own narrative. But one person's voice sang through all 3 core melodies of Dad's life. My sister Paula was not only Dad's eldest child. She worked with him at hospice for 7 years. And in the years after he left hospice and began offering workshops in Europe, she was part of that as well. She added vital, magical parts to Dad's workshops. For those of you who are fortunate enough to have experienced the joyful rituals of the Asclepian feast, then you know Paula's touch. In so many ways, she was Dad's mentor, challenging his assumptions and encouraging his heart's release, right up to the end of her life. Paula died in January, and her absence from this gathering is huge. So before I speak about Dad, I'd like to honor both Dad and Paula together by lighting the vigil candles and listening together to a piece of music that Dad loved.
Towards the end of Michael's life, he got into the habit of doing 2 sounds. One of them was
the performance you are about to see is the River Tree Singers and Friends Choral.
One of them was shh. He would shh everybody. But we thought that was really the drugs. But the other one that was more endearing was that he would go, okay, Sandra, I want to give you that table. Dad, I don't want that table. Sandra, I'm giving you that table anyway. Here, I'll blow it to you. So he would blow it, everything. He blew me these LLF statues. He blew people left and right.
He blew his car.
Yes, he blew his car to his
caregiver,
which was a very beautiful thing. So we thought it was appropriate that at this moment we could use some of that life force energy and blow out our candles, but not to lose the light of Michael, but to blow that light into the world. So if you would blow out your candles now.
So last night, I was fussing over the words to what I wanted to say today, and making little changes here and there. And I was struck by the memory of Dad at Paula's memorial service, about 3 weeks before he died. When it was his time to speak, he staggered to his feet and delivered his message in vintage Dad style. No notes, winging it, full of flourishes and meanders, with all of us who knew him holding our breath, wondering what was next. He spoke from his big, wild, unpredictable, and thoroughly human heart. In the final weeks of Dad's life, when it became clear that even this great tree was indeed going to fall, I wondered what words could possibly capture his essence. And the song from The Sound of Music kept nudging its way in, the one in which the nuns are describing Maria in all her exuberant, exasperating ways. Dad gave us so much material to work with, to write his own Maria song. Although at the time, all I actually belted out was, "He's a headache, he's an angel, he's my dad." What I'm left with when I sift through all the stories and images in all their varied flavors is a deep gratitude to Dad for the bright flame of his life. What I remember most are the flowers he put on my bedside table when I stayed with him. The bags of eclectic groceries he'd bring when he visited, with tins of snails and black rice, coarse-cut marmalade, and sticky Dutch waffle cookies, and odd delicacies from the Chinese grocery he loved. I remember the drinking glasses he left by Dylan and Max's beds when we visited him in Ireland, full of euro coins he had gathered from around his house. Turns out you can fit about 80 euros in a juice glass. Who knew? The boys, just 6 and 8 then, took him out to breakfast in Castletown Bear that day, where he introduced them to blood pudding and Irish bacon, and waxed poetic about the kidneys he could buy at Murphy's Groceries for just 25 cents a piece. I entered Dad's work world the way you might enter a wind tunnel, gripping the walls to keep from being swept away by the force of his convictions, by his imaginative hurricane. And yet his ideas infuse my life, and they encourage a deep friendliness and softness with myself and others. What a gift. When I was gathering photos for the slideshow that will play during the reception, I saw images from one of his workshops that I took part in. And it was so obvious how deeply alive and joyful and buoyant I felt as a result of being there. So brightly lit and happy. He deeply wanted his own heart's release, and I am full of admiration that he took up as his life's work a process that would nurture this in himself and in others. Dad uncovered the coins of life's riches through his work and play, and he scattered them around him as he went. After he died, one of the messages of condolence came from a man named Theo in Holland, whose wife, Shani, became ill with cancer a few years ago. Theo wrote, "Michael visited Shani on December 15, 2014, which is when Dad was 84, in the hospital in the Netherlands when she got chemotherapy treatment. He sent this note before he made the journey. My dear Theo and Shani, may you know that the Nobel Prizes are being given here in Stockholm very soon. I have arranged with the king that the two of you will receive the first ever Nobel Prize for living the loving life, as well as is humanly possible. And he is sending his private jet fully equipped with morphine and champagne, and the twins will have their own horse-drawn carriage and a front row seat. Nothing less is fitting for you both." Dad hand-delivered the Nobel Prize, 2 chocolate bears, which he encouraged them to entrust to their twin grandchildren. Theo wrote, Michael flew with the Nobel Prize bears from Stockholm to Antwerp, and then he drove a rented car to Rotterdam just to see Shani. Amazing. Theo's email continued, Shani told me that she and Michael made each other a promise to welcome the other in heaven, whoever goes last of them. I hope it really worked that way. We don't know yet. We don't know. But what Dad knew very well, and what I deeply know from his presence in my life, is that love is everything that matters. Thank you, Michael Murphy.
Okay, on your program, you're going to see that the next thing we were going to do was the Irish blessing, but we decided what we were going to do first was to open this up to have people speak. And if you use this microphone, I'd like to start with Laurie Mershon. If you would raise your hand, Laurie, so you can bring it here. She's going to read there are many, many people, especially in Europe, who have been involved with Michael, have been in contact with me over the last few weeks, and many, many want to be here. And in fact, they are here. They're here in spirit, and we hold them, and we hold them in love. And one of them, Chits, who was this remarkable woman who Michael and she had this head-butting for years and years and years, but they grew to love each other, and to see that whole thing develop over the years was a pretty amazing thing. And Chits sent a letter that she asked be read tonight, and Laurie will do that. Thank you, Laurie.
Yes, I was in Ireland with Chits and had the opportunity to be in a trio with her. And as I was there, when I was there, and I saw her first walk through the room, the first word that came into my mind was fierce. And then I looked at Michael, and I thought, fierce. It was an interesting dynamic, and it was to my benefit that Chits was more fierce than I was, because I didn't have to be on the receiving end. What was one of the most beautiful things I was able to watch between the two of them. So yes, Chits has a very special part in my heart. I saw myself in her, and I watched an openness that was something I'll never forget, and certainly attributed to Michael's fierceness. Such a loving heart. So here's her letter. Dear Michael, in 2010 there was an ash rain from a volcanic eruption in Iceland called Angela. That was the day you were to start one of your workshops in Ireland. The ash rain kept airplanes grounded all across Europe, and that's why there were only a few people able to come to the workshop. I went to Ireland the day before, so I was there. That day of the ash rain, I met you for the first time. You prepared a wonderful meal for us. From that moment, my resistance started, and also your patience was put to the test. Each year that I came back to your workshops, when you saw my name on the list, you would say, "Oh my God, not Chits." Each year you confronted me with difficult and sometimes strange items like making a family tree, gazing, or getting married with myself. I walked my own path of life, and that was not always easy for you, but we began to respect each other. You showed me pictures of your family, and you felt rich with them. You enjoyed being in Ireland with its beautiful nature, its delicious food, and its great pubs. One day I saw the amorous boy in you waiting at the bus stop for your dear Inga. Dear Michael, through those years I saw different sides of you, the great teacher who could listen very well and at the right time could help clarify important issues, a good storyteller and a good organizer. You were a man with a lot of love inside of you. I got to know a bon vivant, but also sometimes a very lonely human being. Our relationship changed through the years and we became friends, a sort of LLF, brother and sister. Once you called me the younger sister you never had. Dear Michael, today is the memorial celebration of your life. I am sure your spirit is there, and it might be hard for you that you can't say anything. But I can imagine when the moment will come, when the people raise their glasses to you in your life, and then your spirit will shine. Dear Michael, wherever you are, you will always stay in my heart. Goodbye, dear friend. Goodbye, dear brother. Let the blessings of love be upon you and be upon the ones you love. Your friend, Chits. I guess I'll take this moment to share my own story about Michael. I guess many moments in life start with something a little bit magical, and in 2009, my younger brother passed away suddenly, who was my best friend and a dear friend to all my kids, and really kind of the experience kind of scattered our family. And that happened in August, and in December, I had a dream that I had a tattoo of the word witness on my wrist, which I didn't have at the time. And my birthday was in December, and in the dream I had to have this done before the end of the year. So on New Year's Eve day, I went with my younger son to a tattoo artist, and I had the word witness tattooed on my wrist. And 2 weeks later, I was sitting in a workshop with Michael. And those of you who are familiar with LLF know that the witness, which is the meaning, is I will listen without judgment. And I showed up in that workshop, and I gazed in that mirror, and all I saw was damage. And I looked at Michael, and with his curiousness, and as he looked back at me, and I wondered what he saw, what could he possibly see in me? And I continued to wonder that, but I thought if someone as curious and changeable and excited about life could wonder about me, then maybe I should wonder about me too. And I did, and I continued, and I ended up in a workshop in Ireland, and with just Michael gazing and Michael looking, he didn't have to say an awful lot. And in his perfect imperfection, he gave me so much permission to be a human being and to not worry so much about preparing for my life, but just to live my life. And I will treasure him always as someone who really redirected my life, and I will do his work in some way, always. And the last words, I was honored to be at a gathering with Michael a week before he passed, and the last words that I said to him, I whispered to him, was, "You will live forever." And this past week I spent out in the Dakotas with my brother, traveling around in my own history and lineage, and I ended up at a gospel breakfast. And the speaker was talking about the imperfect human and how that it wasn't necessary to seek perfection. It was only necessary to understand that we're all human. And at the end of the breakfast, he reached down into his pocket and he handed out a mirror. So So thank you, Michael, for showing up. Thank you very much.
Whoever would like to speak next, if you would just raise your hand or stand, and the microphone will come to you. Anyone else have a story?
Well, I met Michael because I was working at MSU, and a colleague I barely knew gave me a brochure and said, I somehow think you would want to do this. It was for the very first workshop in Ireland that Michael did. And it was not called Love, Loss, and Forgiveness. It was Death, Dying, and the Soul. And we went not knowing anything about it, but I'm adopted. The only thing I know about my genetic heritage is I'm part Irish. It was like, I get to go to Ireland, so I'm going. I don't care what this workshop is about. But got there, and it was very magical, but it was very different in that there's a feast in the middle. We do dreamers now. We did coma then, and Michael was lying in coma, but we had a feast around him and the two other people who were also in coma. It was a pretty wild experience, and when I got back, it was very hard to explain to colleagues what it was in Ireland. But Michael came many times after that to Michigan. I went many times to Ireland. I had to keep going because I wanted the record of the most times that a single person had been in the Irish workshops. And at 15, I think I'm pretty safe. But I really loved Michael. He was one of my mentors, one of my teachers in life. He had a lot of sayings like, don't work so hard, work softer, which is a really lovely, helpful saying. He would shush people quite often. And he did not enjoy it when we would make him be in the center of the circle and do things. But he was a good sport about it, and I appreciated that he would do that. Stayed at my house many times, and he was a surprise guest at my wedding. A friend of mine had said, there's someone I want to bring to the wedding. I'm not going to tell you who it is. Can I do that? And I was like, I trust you, because you would not bring people that would not want. And it was Michael who showed up to be there and to add his blessings. So, of course, I want to bless him for his wonderful soul, for his open heart, and for all the wisdom that he shared.
Oh. I'm one of the Europeans. I'm from Belgium, and I met Michael. I met Michael about 30 years ago in the Ardennes, where Americans, I think, have a history too, and mostly a bloody history during the Second World War. I took part to a workshop about death and dying at that time with Michael Murphy. I wanted to learn about death and dying for some reason, and it was completely amazing. I went to a second workshop a few weeks later, a few months later, and then even after that, Michael invited me to come to Albany to learn about palliative care at the hospice in Albany. And it's at that time that I met my wonderful wife, Kate, who was one of his nurses. And so, for this reason, I now live here and practice medicine here, and I think it has changed my life completely. I found out since then that this whole thing about learning about death and dying was actually only about life and not about death. And I want to thank Michael. This is a wonderful celebration. You're wonderful people, and Michael has a wonderful family. Like usual, I have trouble speaking and not crying at the same time, but when I speak about things like that, but thank you for inviting me.
Well, my name is Karen. share a story that really formed my life. And I was 22 when I came to hospice, pretty green. And my parents had gone through a divorce, and it was kind of a difficult time for me. And I met Mike, and he wasn't sure I was going to make it. And he said to me, Karen, I'm not sure this is for you, and but I'm willing to give you a try. You're young, and this is hard work. You've got a lot going on. But he trusted me, and 38 years later, I'm still caring for treatment people through my work with ALS for 25 years. But my story was really about what you said about being present without judgment. And I'll never forget when I was doing hospice nursing. We were the first nurses the day the inn opened. And a few months later, Mike gave me a little ticket, and he said, I want you to go see this man, but he can't speak and he can't hear, and he's an alcoholic, and he's had a tough life. He's pushed everybody away from him. But he will spit on you, and he will urinate on you, and it's going to be very challenging. But as someone earlier said, he challenged us all to do incredible work that we didn't think we could do. And he said, you can do this, just be with him. And his name was Leonard. And that was almost 40 years ago. And I went to meet him, and he could not see me, he couldn't hear me. And the only thing he could do was touch and feel you. And sure enough, he was a bastard. I mean, difficult, and peed on us. He had a trach, and he would send all of his secretions at you. And a tough man. And he looked like Jesus Christ in the image that we see drawings of Christ. And but Mike stayed with me, and I became his primary nurse, and I cared for him for 2.5 months. And through that pain that he was suffering and the loneliness he felt, he really had no one in his life except his dog. And that was one of the blessings of hospice, that we could bring animals in, and he could feel his dog, and he could be there with him. And then I remember somehow he communicated to us to put his mattress on the floor. And we weren't sure we could do that in all the regulations of the world. And Mike said, put the mattress on the floor. So we did. It's where he felt safe because he couldn't see and he couldn't hear, and he could be in touch with the level of the floor. And I learned to love him. And I think he loved me. And he stopped peeing on me. He stopped, spitting on us. He stopped being angry over many months. And on Good Friday, it was my day off. And way before I had 3 children and a busy life, I would make fudge. And I brought fudge in for the nurses that were working on Good Friday. And when I got there, they said, Karen, Leonard's moaning, or he's just something. I think he senses you're here. And so I went in, and he took his hands and he ran them down my face and my hair and down my body, and he pulled me down on the mattress. And he laid in my arms and he died. And it was Good Friday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And Mike came in, and he didn't say anything, which was unusual for him. He didn't say anything, and he put his hand on my shoulder and he hugged me, and he just shook his head. So I just want to say thank you, Mike. It was that you challenged me to love someone who was hard to love, and you gave me the strength and the leadership to do what I've done in ALS and to carry the scrolls of hospice in my work with ALS. So I love you and thank you.
want to thank you, Michael, for being a part of my life through my son. He loves you so much as I love you too. You brought so much into his life that he is able now to follow you and hopefully bring the same love that you brought to me, he will bring to everyone else. Thank you.
Thanks, Mom.
Hi, I'm Eileen, and I was a bereavement coordinator at Hospice for several years. And I just want to say that Mike taught me so much. And in the beginning, when I first met him, he was bigger than life to me. And I felt so intimidated. I was afraid to ask him questions. And it was like, oh my goodness, you know, I felt so small compared to him. But then I made the transition. And I just became so comfortable with him. And again, he taught me so much. And I just want to share one lesson that he taught me. I continue to teach at different colleges, death, dying, and bereavement. And every semester I teach my students this one lesson. And I say, Dr. Michael Murphy taught me this. And I had the opportunity to arrange different family meetings for people after the death when they didn't have time to go ahead and have a family meeting beforehand. So I arranged this one meeting with this man. It was just him and Mike and myself. And he proceeded to tell the story after Mike said, tell me about your wife. And he proceeded to talk about his wife and his death. And all of a sudden he started sobbing. And he put his hands in his face and he's just sobbing. And then he looked up at Mike and he said, I'm so sorry for breaking down. And Mike put his hand up in that famous way that he would, put his hand up and he said, don't think of it as breaking down. Think of it as breaking through. And it's such a simple but valuable lesson. I pass that on to everybody else. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Chris. I knew Mike a long time, both in the LLF circle and outside. I don't really have any funny stories to tell about Mike, but and almost anything I might say I think has been said already. So many people think said. But what hasn't happened is I want to publicly acknowledge, especially Suzanne and her husband, for the way you opened your home and your hearts to Mike when he couldn't live in his apartment anymore. That was just a very beautiful, beautiful thing. And I had just the privilege. I happened to stop by for a few hours the afternoon, Mike's last afternoon. And John was there, and just the container that you all had created was just incredible. And you know, the proof's in the pudding, because when I left that afternoon, Mike was still, there was a lot of vitality still there, a lot of physical, and I thought, wow, he's not done yet. But then when I saw that email or whatever, that maybe John, you said that night he had just let go. The thought I had was, that's how safe and loved he felt. That even with still so much of his Mike Murphy-ness to maybe take him forward a few more days, now he knew it was okay. I can go now. So, amen. Well done.
Hello, I'm Letitia Wyatt. It was a few years ago, I think it was 2003, that I first met Michael. Can you hear me? Okay. I had learned about the Love, Lost, and Forgiveness program that was going to be held at Soul Space. My mother had just died, and it was a period in my life when there was many deaths in my family in a very short time. And I was just completely bereft and flattened by ongoing grief and responsibility to manage my mother's estate and other things. And I wanted to go to this program, but I didn't have the money to do it. So I ended up getting a call from Sarah Morgan, who ran Soul Space, and she said, you know, there's some people that were going to come and they can't come, and they would like to turn that contribution into a scholarship. And it was a woman and her father. Now, I may be wrong, but I think that those people were there anyway. And I think it was Mike's way of just making it possible for me to be there but not feel badly about it. A silent scholarship. And I did the program again a year later when my sister died. I lost 9 people in my family in 2 years. And the first thing I said in the first workshop was, when the stick came around to me, I sat there and held it and finally said, I've lost my voice. I couldn't speak. I was so flattened. My spirit was really flat. And anybody who knows me knows that I'm not usually quiet or without spirit. And Michael just, with his gaze, just took me in. I was sitting right directly across from him in this room we were in. And I felt so loved and respected and cared for. And this is my first encounter with him. But over the years we got to know each other because I did the program then a third time in 2009. And this was after the last death that I experienced, which was the one I never saw coming, was when my husband left me in 2004. So now we're in 2009 and I'm just beginning to pull myself together, and there was an opportunity to do the program. It's a 9-month program. And some of you were part of that. And we did it over by meeting a month at a time, and then we'd meet in trios in between each of those sessions. And on the very last weekend, we did the trio at my barn, my studio on the Hudson River, the barn at Bassett House on Hudson, and Susan Allen Craig and Stuart Rosenblatt, I don't know if I got the names right. We married ourselves in that weekend in my space. And 1 week later, there was an event there. It was a fundraiser for a school in Haiti that had been devastated by the earthquake. And one of the people who came to that event was this gentleman who was sitting next to me here, Roger Wyatt. Funny, we have the same last name. I met Roger that day, and the first thing he shared with me was that he was a filmmaker. And he told me that he had worked on a film in Ireland in a Buddhist monastery. And I said, don't tell me you made Michael's film. And he was stunned that I said that. And I was stunned that I had met the man who knew Michael. John, you know all about this, you were part of that. And so Michael just seemed to weave in and out of my life in a way that was very characteristic of just knowing and intuition. And I've heard the story many times about going up Skeleton Michael, John and Michael and Roger. And a few years ago, a couple of years ago, Roger and I married. I think it was just a few months after Michael visited us at the barn, made some soup and salad. We had a lovely gathering there. And when Roger and I married, we married in exactly that spot where we met, where he told me about working with Michael Murphy on the film, Love, Loss, and Forgiveness, under the same mistletoe that we met. And I wish you could have been there, Michael, and I wish you were here today. And I thank you for holding me and holding the space for me to be myself and come back into life. It took something and it took a while, but it made all the difference. God bless.
Thank you. I think we have a lot of beautiful refreshments for you all, and I know that a lot of people would like to mingle and get to talk more about their experiences with Michael, with each other, say hello. So if you want to come up and do the Irish blessing to close the ceremony.
or do you have something?
Well, just my niece Erin made the beautiful, painted the beautiful tree that's in the back, and there was paper leaves back there that if you'd like to love it if you would left a message there, and also on the back table there are many of Dad's books, and you are very welcome to take one or more if you'd like them.
Yeah. So we always would end Michael's workshops with what he called an Irish blessing. I'm not sure that it actually is one, but it was one for Michael, and it became something that we really enjoyed doing. And I'd like to ask you all to stand up, if you would, please. And I'll tell you what we're going to do before we actually do it. But what we're going to do is we're going to reach down deep into the earth, and we're going to take all of that energy and we're going to send it to the heavens with a big Shah. Now I want it to be a big Shah. I don't want it to be a meagerly Shah. Really bring everything you can to this Shah, because it is, Michael's going to hear it. Let's put it that way. So everybody ready? Go deep into the earth and Shah! Please help yourselves to, like I said, please leave a message on the tree, eat and drink free food, and love each other, and most importantly, love yourself. And
with no name, who hides for the dangers outside, who's afraid and ashamed. And he wonders why he never saw before. What a wonderful face. Please forgive me, he speaks to the boy. I will hold you and gaze. Let me lay in your arms. Let me be. Let me smile to your face. It is me. Tries to remember the days when she was younger and pure. She cries for the violence and fear. She was wounded, but she had no cure. And the girl in the mirror screams on and on, with her hands on her face. Please forgive me for not seeing you, she says. I will hold you and gaze. So how can I let it be? Lay your hands on my heart, it is me. How can I let it be?